Wrath and Grace Radio listeners, I want to tell you about one of our sponsors, Kepler Education.
Kepler is a consortium of independent teachers offering classes in all subjects for grades 7 through 12 and beyond.
Unified by a shared vision for classical education, innovative technology, and the historic Christian faith,
Kepler teachers prepare students for a professional and private life well lived, and they do it around a schedule and a budget tailored to the needs of your family. And I'm not just excited about Kepler because they are one of our sponsors, but I too am a Kepler teacher within the consortium. So come check us out at kepler.education.
Kepler is not a traditional online school. It is a consortium of independent online educators unified by a common vision to bring a Christian and classical education to junior high and high school students.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Wrath and Grace Radio, and today we are talking about fatherhood. Now, before we get into it, I want to remind you that we are powered by Logos Bible software. So as you see us on our iPads or on our computers, that's what we're doing, using our resources there. Go ahead and go to logos.com/WGR and enter code WGR8 for discounts. All right, guys, so when we're thinking about fatherhood, obviously from a biblical perspective, thinking about it just high level, right? Being a father, right? Now you can just have a baby, and instantly you're a father, right?
Yeah,
It's
true.
It's just, boom, it happens, and now you're there, right?
Yeah.
And so even before you become a father, what things should a young man be considering before they get a wife, before they have kids? This idea of fatherhood. What can we learn from Scripture and be thinking about there?
Wow, I mean, that's an enormous question there. A man needs to be a man. He needs to be grown. He needs to be a Christian man who knows the Lord and is ready to not only create other human beings, but help them too to become adults. Mm-hmm. And so in order to do that, you got to already be there yourself. It doesn't mean you have to have everything together, perfectly mature, but you need to be responsible enough to do that. So obviously done responsibly by finding a wife that you're going to commit to, and having in mind that with this woman, Lord willing, you're going to create people that you're going to raise and send out into the world. And if you have to think about that.
Yeah.
You have to think about that going into it.
Yeah. One of the things I tell young guys a lot is to look at the qualifications that Paul gives for a deacon in 1 Timothy 3 and consider those. Those are the qualifications for a biblical man, and seek to fulfill those qualifications in your own life. And along those lines, then you become the kind of man that God continues to bless in his life and his ministry, and that will be a blessing to his future wife and children. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's one good kind of practical place to look and just say, who are the men that God equips and uses to serve the church? And if that's if a man's able to look at those and start to see those things come to fruition in his own life, then he's well on his way to being at least prepared to begin that journey of fatherhood.
Mm-hmm. Now, when we talk about fatherhood, obviously we're going to get into conversations that are more specifically about the father and the children. But before we get into that, I don't think you can be a good father and not care for the children's mother well. Mm-hmm. Right? So what should we be thinking about and considering in terms of what does me caring and loving my wife well have to do with being a good father?
Mm-hmm. Well, man, kids need this. They need healthy parents. Not every child is blessed to have any parents. I talk to my kids about this sometimes when they're not listening to mommy and daddy. I say, some kids do not have parents, or they only have one. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, you got both, man. So a healthy marriage is very important for children. It gives children security when they know that mommy loves daddy and daddy loves mommy, and neither's going nowhere.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That gives them a security. Actually, when the marriage is emphasized over the children, that's also very good for them.
Right.
And so those are the sort of things that help children to grow up with confidence, to know that they're loved, and to feel secure. Mm-hmm. So it's very foundational that way.
Yeah. I've always emphasized in my own family that my relationship to my wife is the first, most important relationship in my home. My kids come into the world, they're a welcome addition to the family. 18, 19, 20 years old, they move on, but my wife and I are still there together. Yeah. And so that is a foundational relationship. Mm-hmm. That is the most important relationship. And it flows out from there. In the same way that our relationship to God is of primary importance of all of our other relationships, but the stronger that one is, the stronger all of our others are. And so there's this sort of trickle-down effect, if you will, that when that top relationship is really solid, really tight, it trickles down to others. And what that does then is it relieves your children from having to sort of be stressed out or be anxious about things they shouldn't have to be anxious about. Whether or not dad and mom are getting along, and whether or not they're fighting, and whether or not there's problems there in the home that should be affecting. And honestly, kids often will take those things on themselves and feel guilty about those as if they're the cause of those problems or whatever.
Yeah.
And so the stronger our relationship with our spouse, the less we're putting on our children in an area where they ought not even have to be thinking about. Because they know dad and mom love each other, and no matter what happens, they're going to be there. They're going to be together. It's a solid structure they can rely on.
Mm-hmm. Now, this brings something to mind for me here, where we're going to have people who are genuinely believers. These are Christian men, and maybe for one reason or another, they have found themselves a father without a mother in the picture.
Yeah.
And that doesn't make them less of a father. They're still a father, right? But there's going to be a unique approach to that. Now, that could be through death. That could be through maybe you had a child out of wedlock, whatever it is. But man, you're still a father, right? And so,
That's right.
so before we get into maybe a healthy Christian home environment, what that means, fatherhood, how should someone who's maybe a single dad, or maybe the mom has custody of the kids and I'm still a dad but I don't live with the kid, right? Like, these are difficult things, man.
Totally.
So what kind of mindset, what kind of duty, what kind of responsibility does that type of father have to the children?
Yeah, I mean, so it's a deep question, man, because a man's relationship with his kids is difficult to describe how much he loves his children, And so a situation like that can be, I can imagine how frustrating that can be. So the guy has to know God, man, and he has to cry out to God for help. If he's not in his kids' lives, or if he's unable to be in how he wants to be, and maybe the mother is not a Christian at all, and it's a bad environment in the home, that can be super frustrating for a Christian guy. So he has to be very prayerful about it, and praying that the Lord will help him to be responsible and do everything that he can for the best fighting chance to get custody, or whatever he's got to do, right? So I just want to acknowledge that that's a very tough situation,
Yeah.
But a single father, again, tough situation. There's something that a mother and a woman adds very valuably.
Yeah.
And so he's going to have to be aware of those things in Scripture. What is the type of thing that a godly woman would be adding to this? And he's going to have to think through that, you know what I'm saying? But it can be done. I mean, the Lord's grace is present, and he's able to help in that situation as well as any other. So I don't think there's any need to hang his head,
Yeah, that's right. There's two guys I know, and I respect them tremendously because of what they've done in a situation like this. One guy, him and his wife had 4 children, and after the 4th child, she came to him and said, I don't really want children, I never did, you can have them. And she left the family. So she left him with 4 children. Now those 4 children are 4 of, now they're teenagers going on into college very soon. They're some of the most respectful, godliest children that I know.
Yeah.
They're wonderful. And it's all due to him really pouring into them and having this mindset that my children are my priority, and so everything else comes second to that. He's a hard worker, provides very well for his family, and yet it took a lot out of him having to, and especially 3 of the 4 are girls, and that's hard for a dad without a mom in the picture, because now he's having to deal with things like hair and clothes and the hormones and the changes of the body, and having those conversations with his daughter that a lot of times you're going to depend on the mom to have. And so, hopefully he has others in his life he can depend on to help with those things, but a lot of it's simply recognizing that this is taking me to another level of having to die to myself to live to the advantage of my children. Another dad, just even within the last 2 years, him and his wife had a son, and right after that son was born, at 30 years old, she died. And so now he's raising 2 children by himself. and his wife died, and they had a great marriage, and everything was going very well. But again, he's he's doing the best that he can, and providing for his family, and I think the theme that I see with men who do this and do this well is that everything else in life comes second. With us, and we have our wives, and we're able to sort of be freed up to do our work and our ministry a little bit differently. But these guys really have to focus in on the home in a very different way than we do, and I commend them for it. I think it's a wonderful thing. It's a very unnatural thing, to be quite honest. Naturally, women are the ones who would generally sort of gravitate toward that role more than men, and so when men have to take it up, it's an unnatural thing, and it takes a work of God, tremendous amount of the Holy Spirit at work in their lives. All
right, guys, so as we're continuing to talk about fatherhood, actually before we keep going, I want to remind you that this next part of our show is brought to you by Kepler Education. Now, man, if you're a father and you can get your kids some education from Kepler, I'd say you're doing a good job, right? Or at least you're doing a good job at that. All right, so hit them up, tell them Wrath and Grace Radio sent you. If
that's an easy one.
If that's all you're doing, it's anyway. So one of the things I think, I want to look at this from a couple different angles, right? I think there are, fathers should provide, but what should they provide, right? What are the things that a father should provide? And I think there's a wide array of things that a father should provide to a child. So what would you say?
Yeah, so I mean, I think you summed them all up: security, but things like financial ability, you know what I mean? I mean, the breadwinner. And so providing financially for your children, and that's providing everything that they need. They're kids, so providing all that they need. And ideally, all that is going to help them flourish and help them grow up. Providing protection. So a man needs to be able to provide. He also needs to be able to protect his family. And that can take many different forms because there's a lot of different models of firearms out there. But a man needs to be able to but he needs to be able to protect his home. And his kids need to know that. That daddy can protect the home.
Yeah.
And this is part of not only providing that security, but letting them feel that security. And also, the father's going to be an instructor of his children. He's going to be the primary moral instructor of the children, teaching them the ways of God and disciplining them in the ways of the Lord. And so he's going to provide that sort of triple threat, at least that will come to my mind: the finances, the protection, and the spiritual guidance and nourishment.
Yeah, I felt that when you talked about the providing protection, because I just want to say, man, I know a lot of good brothers, all right, and some of y'all are going to feel this, all right, but if you are wearing flip-flops at any given time, I'm just saying you could provide more protection for you. You're not ready for something. There's something you're not ready for if you're walking around in flip-flops. And the people you love are going to pay the price. So, I'm just saying, yo, put on some real shoes, be ready for anything. All right. So, but what would you add to that, man? Provide.
Well, I mean, what else is there to say? Wade, you took the words right out of my mouth. I mean,
there's somebody twinkling their toes watching this right now. I showing up ain't ready for nothing right now.
I think one of the things that is important is that we recognize a need for the tenderheartedness that comes with loving our children in a way that's very different than any other relationship that we would have. That, especially for guys who are sort of, and there's nothing wrong with being a guy who's really gruff and sort of macho, and that's cool. But he needs to be able to tone that down or turn that off with his children to the extent that they can come to him and know that they're going to be lovingly embraced and cared for, and not sort of always fearful of him, or not thinking that he's their drill sergeant and is going to just order them around, and there's never any times of affection that they can depend on and know is going to be there. So I think that, and that's a reflection, and all of this really is a reflection of how our Father, our Heavenly Father, responds to us. And as we keep that in mind, that He is firm, but He's fair. He is loving and tender-hearted, but He has a standard that He requires us to uphold. And if we keep that in mind as we interact with our children, I think we're reflecting not only good fatherhood on our part, but we're giving them a picture of the fatherhood of God, even though it's very flawed. I think of, along those lines, think of Paul's admonition in Ephesians 6 when he tells fathers, do not provoke your children to anger or to wrath. That you're fair with them, but you're not sort of, and as guys, I think there's a particular tendency that we want to be. We talked before about sarcasm, and we can be sarcastic and joking with them, but they don't get it so much in the way that that's not necessarily going to stir them up to anger or frustration, and we need to be very careful with that so that we don't push it too far.
That's right. Yeah. That's right. We want our children to feel that they can always come to their dad. Stuff.
No matter what.
Because that reflects on God, like you're saying. Like, we go to God, man. He's our Father. And so if we can instill that in our children, that's what a father's like. A father's way more than a friend. But a part of being a father is like you're a friend. A very special kind of friend. That you're open and available to your children. And man, that teaches us about the Lord. He's like that with us. It's awesome.
Yeah, I agree, man. It's one thing I'm grateful for, and it's not something I thought up. I've heard it from somebody else, but yeah, man, I went to my son, my oldest son, and I said, hey, man, sometimes, we're all sinners. We think bad thoughts. We think things we shouldn't think. And if you ever are thinking things that you shouldn't be thinking, and you want somebody to talk about with, come talk to me, right?
Love that.
And multiple times, my son has come to me and said, Dad, I was thinking bad things. Wow. And he sits down and says, okay, what were you thinking? And we talk about it. And usually the bad things come after he gets in trouble and he gets disciplined.
Yeah, of course.
And then he gets sent to his room or whatever it is. And then when we talk, Dad, I was thinking bad things about you. Here's what they were. but we have really good conversations because of that, and I can always point him back to Jesus. We pray together, right?
Exactly.
So I totally agree with that.
And he feels good about that, and it opens up a channel and creates like a pattern that when they get older, it shouldn't, like, this is why kids hide from their parents.
Right.
They hide their sin. They hide because they're not used to doing that.
Yeah.
They've either always met a bad response and it's never been encouraged in them. Where we teach our children's hearts and our sons to trust their father.
Yeah.
That's really good.
I think part of the instruction you had mentioned, their spiritual instruction, but it's something we like to emphasize a lot, is that we're finding every opportunity to point out the good and the true and the beautiful to our children. That as we see those things come up in life around us, as we see opportunities to introduce them to things, that we're taking advantage of those. And what does that mean? That means that there's going to be times when, hey, Friday night I wanna hang out with my guys, but my kid has a soccer game, so I'm going to the soccer game, or I'm going to the piano recital, or I'm going to the art show, whatever it is, because I'm dying to myself, my own needs or wants, desires for the good of my children. Because here's the reality: we have far longer in life as men without our children in our home than we do with them.
Yeah.
And it seems in the moment like, man, this is a lot of years, but it's not a lot of years.
For a short time,
and before long, they're gone, maybe living somewhere else entirely, and you long for those days when you get to go on a Saturday morning at 8 a.m. to the soccer field or to whatever it is they're doing.
Yeah.
You don't get that anymore. So,
what's funny about this, not funny, but interesting about this is there's not a lot of excuses to not be able to give our kids the attention that they need, especially when considering entertainment, because there's nothing you're watching that you can't pause, that you can't stop. There's nothing on your phone that, you know what I mean? Like,
back in the day, that wasn't the case.
Yeah, everything's so on demand, right? And you should have given your kids the attention anyway.
Of course, yes.
But not even more so now. I think about that. My kids have a question and they want to do. There's nothing I got going on where I'm just in my leisure time or whatever it is that I can't stop it. I'm not going to miss anything. You know what I mean? And so I've thought about that. And I try to keep that in mind with my kids. Like, stop what I'm doing.
I think one of the things we should be mindful of is incorporating them in the things that we do. Whether if it's my leisure time is generally spent playing golf, so I've enjoyed. I've mentioned it before a time or two. So I'll take them with me. I like them to go with me to experience that and then get into it themselves. Sometimes when I'm hanging out with friends, I will bring them with me.
That's cool.
People watching the show right now don't know this, but my kids are here with us, right here in this room, and so we spend
behaving very well.
Behaving.
So far, so good.
And it's part of those experiences as they gain those in their own lives that they start to learn things that we can't teach by just sitting them down and having a conversation about this thing. It's the experience of life that they get to live, watching their parents interact with other people, being able to take part in whatever it is that's going on. That's invaluable, and I learned a lot of lessons in life by doing that with my own dad, and now being able to bring my children into those things. So,
that's what you want. My dad taught me to do this.
Of course,
my dad who did this for me. It's awesome.
Yeah, and let's stay there a bit, because one of the things I want to talk about, we talked about what should fathers provide.
Yeah.
But what should be on display? What things should a kid just through osmosis just pick up?
Yeah.
Right? And so let's keep that going. Next part of this show is brought to you by Magathy Payments. And so as you continue to do your business virtually or electronically, go ahead and hit up Magathy. Those guys are going to be the best ones to help you with that, all right? Tell them Wrath of Grace Radio sent you. And so let's talk about that. What should be on display? What should just be absorbed by just the presence, being around, watching, observing? What would you say?
Yeah, so I mean, it's a little bit like Magathy Payments. If you're a client of Magathy Payments, you're going to know one thing about J. Aaron Geronimo. He cares about me. He cares about me.
It's true.
And
he always has a story too. There's always a story.
Big cool stories. Yeah. It's a most basic, fundamental thing that kids should understand, and never ever question that their father loves them.
Absolutely.
Really, really loves them.
Yeah.
So that's basic. And that doesn't always happen.
Right. That's true. I want to display for my children a love of learning, a love of understanding, a love of knowledge. I want them to see me reading and loving books and taking those in taking classes and in increasing my understanding and knowledge of whatever it is I want to learn. This idea that learning is a lifelong process, because if it's not in any kind of one of the more proper academic subjects, it is, if nothing else, that I'm constantly learning more of God and who He is and what He has done and is doing in this world. And so that sense, I want to instill in my children, just as you're saying, like through this, just observing it and taking it in, and how to treat other people.
Exactly.
And to know that our relationships with other people are different depending on who they are, depending on the circumstances, and that the way that we interact with each other is going to be different in this setting than another setting, and then how I treat mom versus how I treat my parents versus how I treat the people in our church. That there are differences there, and it's not bad. It's not that we're being hypocritical or anything like that. It's just that different relationships require different responses. And that's not initially something that we understand because it's told to us or because we just know that to be true.
Right, man,
It has to be learned through observing that. And so that's another big thing that sort of stands out as you say that.
Yeah.
Something else I'm thinking about, unless you're going to build on that.
Okay.
Something else I'm thinking about is that children should view their fathers as somebody who always stands up for what is right.
Yes,
If there's a situation in a social setting or anything, kids need to know, Dad would say something about this.
Yeah.
And it teaches them, you got to say something when something's wrong.
Yeah.
And and then that allows them to be brave and teaches them what it's like to have moral courage.
Yeah.
And that type of thing.
You got to do the hard things in front of your children sometimes. And
and
sometimes that even means toward them.
Yeah.
Asking for their forgiveness, apologizing for something you did wrong, or when you responded harshly in the wrong way, so we need to provide discipline, but we also need to provide a place where they know that if he's done something wrong, we'll know that, and he will make that clear to us.
Yeah. And I think, man, like I want to see my kids. I want my kids to see me repenting.
Yeah.
I want my kids to see me praying.
Yeah.
I remember one of the first times it wasn't really a goal of mine to like, oh man, I want my kids to see me doing this. I remember the first time one of my sons walked into the room, and I was in my room and I was kneeling and I was praying, and my son was like, "What's Dad doing?" Right? And my wife was like, "Oh, Dad's praying," right? And he was a couple years ago. He's only 5, but then now every time my son sees me praying, and I'll hear him, "Oh, Dad's praying," and he'll leave. And I thought about that. I was like, wow, that matters. Like for my kids to know that praying. Like I tell them, it's not a kiddie thing. Like, oh, if you're scared when in your bed, you can pray to God about that. It's not a kiddie thing. Like, no, man, we should pray. you know. So yeah, man, that's good. Need to model some stuff. So stuff on display, right? That's good stuff. How is being a father different, or how does it look different or feel different for being a father of a little boy versus being a father of a little girl, right? Should there be any noticeable differences in terms of what that looks like, what those engagements feel like and sound like, right? And both of us have little boys and little girls, right? And
in fact, all three of us.
Yes. This guy. When I said this guy, I mean this guy.
I wonder if we were us. There.
Yeah,
Our hosts.
Yes.
Editorial us.
Yeah.
Yes. All three of both of us have kids, and So, Nick, you've obviously got stuff to say. Right?
Well,
right. So, but yeah, man, what do you think?
Absolutely. I think. Well, and it's not just the difference between boys and girls and being a father to those differences, but each individual child is different. That's right. And understanding them and how they tick and what sets them off and what doesn't. And knowing those things requires that you are very involved in their lives, you're having regular conversations with them. But there are things, and we've talked about this before, that I want to instill in my daughters that I don't necessarily need to be as instilled in my son, and vice versa. Mm-hmm. I want him to be trained up to be a strong leader who can get roughed up and can take some punches, and that means there's going to be a need for some training in being brave, in being courageous, in being chivalrous. Regardless of what the world says today and the drive of feminism, I want my son to be a man who stands up for, protects women. That includes, at this point in his life, his sisters and his mother, that he treats them right, that he doesn't hit them, pull their hair, that he speaks nicely to them, that he holds a door for them, that he serves them. All those things that we hope that our sons will be when they're older, they need to be now. Mm-hmm. And so I'm going to train that differently into him. But then my girls, it's not, I want them to have similar qualities in terms of being able to be leaders and to be respectable and to be continually be encouraged in terms of their education and their abilities to do those things. But there's a different approach, there's a different perspective. I'm not going to be probably as direct all the time in everything with them as I am with him. It's not as cut and dry, mm-hmm. if you will. There's a different level of tenderness. There's a different level of interaction, and maybe not something that's easy to explain, but more that it's worked out because of our natural inclination as men to respond to our daughters differently. I think that's part of the reason why daughters often are really close with their dads and sons are really close with their moms, because we interact with each other in the way that we do in any other male-female relationship, because we sort of think differently about how we're going to do that.
Mm-hmm. So on that one as well, it's the personality creates a lot of flex there.
Yeah.
So my daughter is very similar to me and aggressive and upfront and very hard-headed, and so there's a way in which
she is a lot like you.
Yeah, that's right, man. How do you think I got here, bro? My son, on the other hand, is a lot more tender, actually. And so even though he's the dude, and I constantly try to instill that in him, you're the dude. That means you take everything. You carry everything. Like, mm-hmm. you just have to take it, With her, I do become a little more direct in some ways, and with him, I have to be careful of not being too tough. So it's really about loving the individual as they are, mm-hmm. male, female, and then all the personality traits. And you really got to be careful about doing that right. Yeah. And you're not going to do it perfect. You know what I'm saying? There's a way in which we're going to influence our kids for bad sometimes. We're going to do things that, that God has to protect us from that.
Yeah.
But we're not going to do it perfect. Mm-hmm. But if we're intentional about shepherding the individual, then I think the Lord will really bless it.
Yeah. And I definitely can appreciate that. And yeah, I've got 3 kids, and my boys are unique. I named my son Samson
Oh, man.
You know, I just wanted,
It was the right name, wasn't
a
it?
strong name. It's weird because emotionally, he's the one I've got to be the most careful with.
So he turned out like the biblical Samson.
Yeah, man. It's
I
like
middle
that.
named my youngest son Solomon, but I'm not sure that it's going to the wisdom side yet. Probably the other side of Solomon.
Samson is the athlete, though, man. Samson, like he's the only one of my kids been in the emergency room, and you know all that stuff. Like the dude's risky, all that stuff. But emotionally, man, that dude is a softie, man.
Yeah.
So so it's just
You
interesting.
could wreck him if you weren't careful. That's
I could,
exactly.
and I have to be mindful of
Judah
that.
is,
I have to, and my wife is kind to let me know. Yo, so how's that work, man? Just in terms of how your wife helps you guys be
Okay.
a better father.
Big time. So, you know, I'm tuning in on scriptures like Proverbs 31 that give the value of the godly wife. What's her real value? And one of the things he says in there is that the teaching of kindness is on her lips. The kindness and gentleness teaching. And my wife has displayed that so well.
Absolutely.
I mean, my kids are they're nice. And they get that from her, man. Like, she's instilled in them the teaching of kindness. And I try more and more to listen to my wife, man, and be sensitive to her perspective on things, to help me shepherd the kids better and vice versa. But man, a good godly woman, she's gonna have that.
Yeah, man. 100%. I totally agree. I get that sometimes. I'll get the look, or I get the slight comment. You know, maybe I'm a little extra. I need to dial back or whatever. But
I can't imagine.
I know it's hard to believe. But yeah, I think they and that's the thing. That's honestly, though, I think the opposite is also true, and I think one of the tragedies of fatherlessness and really, which is a huge problem, especially in Western civilization now, is fatherlessness. That dads have stepped out of the picture, moms are left to do it, and dads provide something to children that moms cannot, and moms provide something to children that dads cannot, no matter how hard they try. That's not to say that by God's grace we can't get them through childhood and them be great children and very successful adults. That's not what we're saying. But what we are saying is there are things that are missed when that is not there.
Exactly.
And so I think as you live in that relationship and you learn how that interaction goes between husband and wife as they're raising their children, you see how valuable that is, and you see that play out in your children. And I think, honestly, the pandemic, I will call it, of male softness in our culture has to do with fatherlessness. That men...
Big time, man.
Yeah, that men
real.
weren't men enough to stand up and take on the role of fatherhood. They left their families, they left their children to be raised by their mothers. No fault of their moms, but they don't know how to train boys to be men.
The teaching of discipline.
Exactly.
That's on our lips, man.
Yeah.
Big time, they need that.
Yeah. And being a father's cool, man. Like,
Of course it is.
you know, we probably
Get
all
over
have
yourself, man.
Yeah, we probably all have friends who are single, they don't have kids or whatever, and there's times maybe you look at their life and say, like, wow, they've got a lot of freedom to do what they want, and they get to do cool stuff, they have extra money, all these things, but at the end of the day, like, they're missing out. We're not missing out, they're the ones missing out because they don't have this really cool relationship they get to have from day one all the way through the rest of their lives that you get. And then let's be honest, like, we're training them to take care of us when we're older, so we have that benefit later on in life.
It's good.
So that exactly, bro. That's why I tell my kids, man, you're gonna do it for us.
Yeah,
You can pay us back.
Stack up the cash because you'll need it when I'm old.
That's right. But that makes me think about, parents dying,
Right.
which happens,
Yeah.
which is tragic. One of the things that we do as fathers, and I do this with my kids periodically, is just remind them that when daddy dies, you know where I'm going.
Yeah.
You have no doubt about it. You meet me there, but you know where I'm going. I'm not leaving any question on that with them. And that's part of it, preparing your kids for your own death.
That's right.
Yeah.
You're not going to be around forever. you
Yeah.
know? So we need to do that, and that gives them a security.
Yeah.
It does. It's good for them to think about that ahead of time,
Yeah.
and not catch up with their father's death if it happens tragically and they've never been prepared by him. You can't. In that way, you can send words beyond the grave to your kids, words that stay with them.
Yeah.
You know.
That was one of the fatal flaws in Black Panther. His dad didn't prepare him for when he died.
Not at all.
And
man.
then he had to go do some foolishness, man. They had to lay him down in those KFC seasoning salts.
Come on, bro.
They laid him down in that original recipe so he could go see his ancestors.
Come on, bro.
And talk to his dad. That joint was crazy, yo. So if you don't want your kid laying down in KFC seasoning, yo, to come talk to you after you die, like T'Challa, yo, you gotta have these conversations.
Okay, all right. Before we got on that, there was somewhere else I wanted to go with the death piece. All right, listen, man, listen. You got to prepare your spouse for death too, like for your
of course,
own death.
yeah.
Listen, man, and this happens. A young family, young situation, where one of the parents dies and the kids are young. Yo, so you have to consider remarriage. You have to consider that sort of thing. So if I die, my wife has names of people men that she's gonna bring into the life of my children, not to marry. You know what I'm saying? But there's immediately people where I'm like, yo, if I kick the bucket for real, then you have to bring these guys into the kids' lives, especially my sons.
Yes.
You got to bring these dudes in, right?
Wow.
So based on current health conditions, I should be expecting a phone call
Wait,
sometime
man, listen,
words
in the next 3 to 5
The words were right here.
Yo, listen, man.
Right here on my tongue. Given your current diet and lack of exercise, I'm expecting that very
soon.
soon.
You see how clean I eat?
The
The
funny thing is, our wives will be calling each other at the exact same time. What's gonna happen? We're both gonna croak
I know,
out.
right? Yo, so on that, man, I've told my wife, if I go, like, you have to marry some good dude. Like, you have to. You're gonna have to have a dude in the house. It's gonna have to be, right? If the kids grow up, and then maybe you don't need one then, but you gotta have a dude around. So that can be an uncomfortable conversation. But I think that's part of it, though.
And isn't this
For real, man?
I mean, it all runs so contrary to the modern narrative, doesn't it? This idea that, sort of the feminists have promoted is we don't need men. Men aren't necessary. We can do everything a man can do. Okay, well, maybe in certain realms that's true, but in terms of fatherhood, it's just not. It's just not. But when we start to deny the fundamental reality of biological sex and all the questions about gender and the differences between men and women, then all that falls apart, and everything's supposed to be just sort of androgynous, where there are no distinctions to be made. That again, we have soft men, we have women who they don't display feminine qualities that we want to see, and so then what do the relationships look like? There's no wonder why there's so much divorce. There's no wonder why there's so much just promiscuity and everything else, because it's like these relationships don't matter to the extent that they should to people, because we've completely lost the biblical narrative of what a true sound family structure should look like, so that children are nurtured in an environment where they go on to create beautiful, sound family structures on their own.
Yeah. So here's the deal. You guys need to go join the Fellowship of the Cup. You need to do it right now, all right? Because first of all, you're going to get one of these awesome mugs, all right? You're going to get that. You're going to join the Fellowship of the Cup. Yes, exactly like that.
Yeah,
well, actually, no. You cannot get this one,
Sold out.
actually.
And there's not much longer on this one either.
Yeah, and that one's going, right? Every year we do one run of a different type, and that's all you get, right? So the people who got both, they've been rocking with us for a long time.
Yep.
But if you got both, take a picture of both of them joints, put it on the Facebook page so people can know you've been rocking with us for a long time, right? So hit us up,
Yes,
Instagram,
and
all of
also
that.
Make sure you like the video and share it if you have both mugs or one mug or no mugs.
Yes, show people what's up. So until next time, today we talk fatherhood. This is Wrath of Grace Radio. Grace and peace.